Why are you doing this?
Because when you can do the things that I can, but you don't, and then the bad things happen, they happen because of you.
So you want to look out for the little guy, you want to do your part, make the world a better place, all that, right?
Yeah, just looking out for the little guy. That's what it is.
Today, I want to talk about MCU Spider-Man and the arc he goes on throughout his 3 Spider-Man movies. Now, I think Tom Holland is a respectable Spider-Man, but he definitely gets a lot of hate. And I think one of the biggest criticisms is that he feels like an Iron Man Jr. He doesn't actually feel like the Spider-Man that we know. And honestly, I kind of think that's a little bit of the point. Maybe it wasn't intentional at first, but I think by the time No Way Home comes, they really drive that point home. And by the way, spoilers for all of No Way Home, pretty much. And to get this point across, I'm going to break this down into the 3 lessons that Spider-Man learns on his journey. Now, I think the best thing that they did for the MCU Spider-Man was not give him an origin story and then later us finding out that we were just watching his origin story over the course of 3 Spider-Man movies. Lesson 1 is that he cannot depend on other heroes. He has to believe in himself. And this is beautifully done in Homecoming. Now, if one of your biggest criticisms is that he feels like an Iron Man Jr. or he just depends too much on Tony Stark's tech or the Avengers, you're right. Actually, you are right. But I think you need to go back and rewatch Homecoming because they explore this. That's the whole point, to be honest. Now, we have to remember that this Spider-Man is a Spider-Man that grew up with Iron Man in the Avengers and all these amazing heroes saving the day every day. And he has these ginormous expectations as a hero. And I think it's canon now, if I remember right, that he's the little boy wearing the Iron Man helmet in Iron Man. So clearly he looks up to Tony Stark as it is. When he gets bit by the spider, he gets closer to becoming a hero like Iron Man. And Iron Man takes him under his wing. I think at first, it was bizarre that they didn't include Uncle Ben or mention him. But by the end of No Way Home, I honestly don't mind it. I think it shows that we don't necessarily need Uncle Ben. We just need what Uncle Ben stood for. And I think it makes more sense that Aunt May stands for that later on in No Way Home. But this Spider-Man grew up depending on all of these heroes to save the day all the time. So I think that it was important that at the beginning of Homecoming, we had Iron Man saving the day multiple times. Iron Man's armor comes and saves Peter once he's drowning, and Iron Man himself comes and saves the day when the ferry gets split in half. And you have these moments where Spider-Man essentially fails and he has to depend on Iron Man to save the day. I think this adds a lot of weight to the scene where he's buried underneath the rubble of the building and he's just yelling for somebody to help him, but nobody's coming. And he looks down and he sees his reflection with the mask in the puddle, and he learns that he has to believe in himself or else he's not worthy to call himself Spider-Man. And he's able to power through it and get back up. And I think that's one of the most important things that Spider-Man needs to learn. Now, on to lesson 2. In lesson 2, he needs to learn to be his own hero, that he's never going to be Iron Man. Now, Far From Home takes place after Iron Man sacrifices himself. people are looking to Peter Parker as if, or people are looking to Spider-Man as if he's going to replace Iron Man. He kind of has to deal with the fact that this happened so fast. He was Spider-Man for maybe a year. I'm not sure what the timeline is, but he was Spider-Man for not very long. So this is all super new to him, and people are looking to him to be this iconic hero, and he's not ready for it. He just learned how to not have to depend on other heroes. And it's clear early on that he still doesn't believe in himself fully. He doesn't think that he's going to be the next Iron Man. And when he sees Quentin Beck, Mysterio, who basically embodies what an Avenger should be, he immediately is like, okay, yeah, that's who needs this Tony Stark tech and who's going to become the next Iron Man. By the time he realizes the mistake he made and he gets defeated by Mysterio, he has this awesome conversation with Happy about how people are expecting him to step up and be the next Iron Man. And Happy just flat out tells him that you're never going to be Iron Man.
The whole world is asking who's going to be the next Iron Man. I don't know if that's me, Happy. I'm not Iron Man.
You're not Iron Man. You're never going to be Iron Man. Nobody could live up to Tony. Not even Tony.
I think this is really important for Peter Parker to hear at this moment. He essentially needs to decide what kind of hero he's going to be and how to be his very own hero. How to be Spider-Man, not Iron Man. If these movies acted as if Iron Man wasn't that big of a deal and acted as if the Avengers weren't a big part of this Peter Parker's life, then it would feel weird. Everybody would be, that would be the biggest criticism, is people would be like, where's Iron Man? Where's all these heroes when all this is happening? The fact that he would use Tony Stark's tech to create his own Spider-Man suit is a nice little spin on the idea of him creating his own Spider-Man suit. And we're not quite there yet, because he isn't quite the Spider-Man that we know yet. I think that's where people lost a lot of faith, where they decided that this isn't my Spider-Man. This isn't Tobey Maguire. This isn't Andrew Garfield. This isn't even the PS4 Spider-Man. This is something else. And I think that's the point. Like, maybe even if it wasn't at first, I think that by lesson 3, it all fits together nicely. So lesson 3, selfless. Like Tobey Maguire says in No Way Home, we gotta save them all. No Way Home is the biggest lesson for MCU Spider-Man. Now that we've started to push Spider-Man in the right direction, it's time to really send it home. Again, with these home references. Now, this movie is a lot more serious than the previous 2 movies, which I really liked. I think No Way Home is the best of the MCU Spider-Man, period. This is the best of Tom Holland. This is the best of Andrew Garfield. Tobey Maguire didn't get to do as much as I would love for him to do, but I think he did plenty. Back to the point that this might not have been, this wasn't the plan from the beginning. There's no way it was. And I think that's really apparent with Aunt May, because another problem that people have is that Aunt May is not a relatable character. She's not really somebody that is a moral guide for Peter Parker. She's rarely there in his trilogy, except for in this last film. And it's a shame, because I think that if they would have added more of Aunt May, her death would have been way more tragic. Now, her death plays one of the biggest moments in MCU Peter Parker's life. This is the first time that he's been pushed so hard that he wants to actually kill Green Goblin. If we would have got more Aunt May, it would have made her death in No Way Home mean that much more. Now this is a very important moment. And it was a very sad scene. I definitely shed a tear, but not as much as in PS4 Spider-Man. Spoilers for PS4 Spider-Man, when Aunt May dies at the end of that. I think the important thing there is that Spider-Man has to choose. He can save Aunt May and let thousands of people die, or he can let Aunt May die and save thousands. And he has to learn how to be selfless. And that is reflected in No Way Home as well. At this point, we don't really know when Uncle Ben died, or if Uncle Ben was really around, right? Uncle Ben could have died when Peter Parker was really little, and that's why we don't really hear about it, because it didn't play a big part in Peter Parker growing up. And people were upset because they thought that Iron Man was the next Uncle Ben. But this is when I think most people realized, like, oh, they were saving this for Aunt May. And Aunt May delivers the lines that will shape Spider-Man for the next films to come. After this, Peter Parker is going down the dark path, and you get this awesome moment. Tom Holland's Peter Parker is completely broken. This is the hardest thing he's ever gone through, and his friends are there supporting him. And the two people that will truly understand him the most show up: Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker's Spider-Man. And they share their stories about loss and how it made them go down this dark path of anger and revenge. And they have the chance to save Tom Holland from going down that path. He says that he wants to kill Green Goblin. At the end, the final showdown, when Peter Parker comes face to face with Green Goblin, I think this is the most intense fight that we've gotten from Spider-Man in a long time. You can see just how close he is to losing it. And when he picks up the glider that killed Aunt May and he is ready to kill Green Goblin, and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man jumps in the way and stops it, you get this awesome moment where no words are exchanged. They could have easily did a flashback to Aunt May saying that we have to save all of them to drive the point home and make it blatantly obvious what they were trying to do here. But instead, they did this awesome thing where no one says a word. It's just their faces. And Tom Holland drives it down one more time, but Tobey Maguire does not budge, and he just looks at him further. This isn't going to change anything. I know what you're feeling, but this is where you need to step up and do the right thing. Do what Aunt May died for. Even after what happens to her, she still says that she did the right thing. It's really important that she does the right thing and pays for it with her life, just like Uncle Ben did. This is where he finally becomes Spider-Man. He learns that saving people is going to need to come before himself. Immediately right after, he makes the biggest decision I've ever seen Spider-Man have to make in a movie. He chooses to have Doctor Strange make everyone forget about Peter Parker. Peter Parker no longer has Aunt May. He no longer has Tony Stark. He no longer has support from Stark Industries. He no longer has support from the Avengers, most likely. We're not too sure how that's going to work. But another thing that people pointed out was that Morgan Stark, Tony Stark's daughter, isn't going to know who Peter Parker was. Peter Parker is pretty much the reason Tony Stark created time travel and saved all these people, and now the world just completely forgot who he was. And that is the most selfless thing he could have done. And by the end of No Way Home, Tom Holland's Spider-Man is fully Spider-Man. He's on his own, he's making his own suits, and he's learned these 3 really important lessons. like I said, maybe it wasn't methodically planned out, but I think executed, it was done pretty well, given that they had to tie him into this universe that is much larger than just him. He didn't get 6 movies to himself, he got 3 movies to himself, and 3 movies that had to tie into a bigger world. And I think if they would have ignored the rest of the Avengers and Iron Man and pretty much pushed them to the side, people would have thought that was weird. It would be weird if Iron Man just wasn't mentioned, or he wasn't such a big part in his life, because this is the world that this Spider-Man grows up in. I think that it's a unique take on the character, and if he's not your favorite Spider-Man, that's okay. You can have your favorite Spider-Man. He's not even my favorite Spider-Man. I grew up with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies, so Tobey Maguire's my favorite Spider-Man of the movies. My favorite Spider-Man of all time is PS4 Spider-Man. Honestly, I think Andrew Garfield is an amazing Spider-Man. God, I didn't mean to do that. He truly is amazing. He's amazing. And I think he really brought it. I think a lot of people are realizing, myself included, that Andrew Garfield knows what it takes to be a good Spider-Man. I think right now is just a really good time to be a Spider-Man fan. He didn't start off Spider-Man. He became Spider-Man. This was an origin story over 3 movies, and I think that was an excellent idea. They've basically rebooted their own series without hiring a new actor. They've brought everything full circle around and again, and they can take it anywhere. Maybe I've given you a different outlook on this Spider-Man, and you'll go back and you'll watch the trilogy and you'll have a different take on it. Or maybe I'm just wrong. That's possible too, I guess. You know, to each their own. If you still hate MCU Spider-Man, then more power to you. But that's all I got. So, till next time, guys. Bye.
Looking down, I see you below. When I get too close, the winds will blow. I keep on falling faster. I'm losing all that matters. Right now, you're all I'm after. I hope you're my next chapter. I hope you're my next chapter.